Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Understanding that 3 bills at the desk due a second reading en bloc.
Leader is correct. Clerk will read the titles of the bills for the second time. En bloc.
S-28, a bill to reauthorize the United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Act of 2015 and for other purposes. H.R. 21, an act making appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2019 and for other purposes. H.J. Res. 1, making further continuing appropriations for the Department of Homeland Security for fiscal year 2019 and for other purposes.
In order to place the bills on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14, I would object to further proceeding en bloc.
Objection having been heard, the bills will be placed on the calendar en bloc.
So, Mr. President, for years, America's vital interests in the Middle East have been jeopardized by regional chaos. The security of our ally Israel continues to be challenged by the long reach of the Iranian regime and its affiliates. In Syria, the Assad regime has made its own nation a graveyard for hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. And the resulting chaos continues to provide Iran and Russia opportunities to expand their malign influence throughout the region. That's why the Senate's going to vote later today to take up pressing legislation that tackles all of this head on. The bill at hand would reaffirm the United States' commitment to Israel's security and authorize military assistance, cooperative missile defense, and loan guarantees. It would counter an aggressive and hostile attempt to delegitimize the state of Israel through economic boycotts. It would also reauthorize efforts to strengthen defense cooperation with our ally Jordan as its people and government grapple with the security and humanitarian ramifications of the Syrian crisis. And importantly, the legislation also includes the Caesar Syria Civilian Protection Act. This provision would hold accountable the individuals responsible for the senseless evils of the Assad regime and impose severe penalties on the entities that support them. So we'll vote later today on whether or not members of this body believe that these issues should be addressed. It's my sincere hope that the Senate will approve these bipartisan proposals and send the strong message of support that our friends and partners in the Middle East deserve. During the last Congress, there was broad agreement on both sides of the aisle on the need for action. I expected today's action to be a big bipartisan vote, not some partisan showdown. But over the last few days, Mr. President, something seems to have happened. The Democratic leader and several of his colleagues have stood up and said they want to block the Senate from even considering this legislation. Now, never mind that it includes legislation co-sponsored by the Senate Democrats last Congress. Never mind that Senate Democrats mentioned the Syria crisis literally dozens of times last month here on the Senate floor. In spite of all that, some Democrats have now threatened to block us from even taking this legislation up later today. So we'd have to ask why. Because we're 18 days into the partial government shutdown caused by Democrats' total unwillingness to negotiate with the White House over border security. Democrat intransigence has made sure that a quarter of the federal government has been shut down for more than 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Now they're threatening to shut the Senate down, too. Got the government shut down for 2 weeks, now they want to shut the Senate down. They're threatening to shut down efforts to protect our allies and strengthen our relationship with Israel, something that all recently claimed to support. So let's remember what we're talking about. In light of the urgent humanitarian and security crisis on our border, the President is requesting $5.7 billion for physical barriers and border security. For some context, that's just about one-tenth of 1% of federal spending. 1/10 of 1%. For physical barriers like the fences and barriers which already exist, which Democrats have previously voted for with enthusiasm. Back in 2006, then Senators Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and our colleague, the current Democratic leader, all voted for more than $1 billion to construct about 700 miles of physical barriers. Then Senator Obama called it badly needed funding for better fences and better security that should help stem some of the tide of illegal immigration. That was Senator Barack Obama. Senator Schumer later described his vote proudly, quote, miles of border fence that create a significant barrier to illegal immigration. As recently as 2015, Secretary Clinton boasted, quote, I voted numerous times to spend money to build a barrier to try to prevent illegal immigrants from coming in. That's Hillary Clinton. Well, Mr. President, obviously that was then, and today the new Speaker of the House is trying to argue that a physical barrier is, quote, immoral. Immoral? Today, my friend, the Democratic leader is proposing to add a Senate shutdown to the partial federal government shutdown and block even more of the people's business, all to avoid more of what he already voted for. Maybe the Democratic Party was for secure borders before they were against them. Or maybe they're just making it up as they go along. Or maybe they are dead set on opposing this particular president on any issue, for any reason, just for the sake of opposing him. Now look, walls and barriers are not immoral. How silly. Enforcing our laws wasn't immoral back in 2006, when then Senator Clinton, then Senator Obama, and our friend, the Democratic leader, were proud to vote for physical barriers. The only things that have changed between then and now are the political winds and, of course, the occupant of the White House. So this is no newfound, principled objection. It's just political spite, a partisan tantrum being prioritized over the public interest. So for more than 2 weeks, they've indulged in that partisan tantrum rather than negotiating good faith over border security funding, hardly something that should be a partisan subject in the first place. They put that partisan tantrum ahead of keeping a quarter of the government open. And now they're saying their partisan tantrum is more urgent than pressing legislation that concerns our alliance with Israel and the Syrian civil war. Well, look, Mr. President, I hope that isn't the case. I hope that our Democratic colleagues don't pile on even more pointless obstruction. I hope they don't block the Senate from turning to this important legislation, by the way, that they support. We'll find out later today. We all know what is necessary to move past the funding impasse, a negotiated solution that can pass the House, earn 60 votes here in the Senate, and gets a presidential signature. That's what it takes to make a law. As I've stated clearly, the Senate will not waste floor time on show votes, messaging votes, or any other proposals which fail to check those boxes regarding the funding bills. And the Democratic leader actually shared that opinion earlier. Here was a fairly recent quote from the Democratic leader. The president must publicly support and say he will sign an agreement before it gets a vote in either chamber. That was a fairly recent quote. Well, I'm glad we seem to agree on that. No wasted floor time on appropriation bills that fail to clear the president's reasonable threshold. For the sake of the humanitarian crisis on our border, as the president will describe in his address to the nation this evening, for the sake of our national security, and for the sake of all the Americans who need all of their federal government reopened, I would urge our Democratic colleagues to get past these harmful political games and get serious about negotiating with the president.
Hi everyone, my name's Mike. I'm the creator of Mox News, and for the last 15 years I have been telling you that as long as I have the support of the community that I serve, Mox News will post videos forever. And that's the truth. As long as I have your support, no one could ever make me stop. Unfortunately, currently, less than 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% of Mox News viewers ever donate, tip, or contribute anything back. Again, let me make that really clear. Much less than 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% ever give anything back. And to those of you who have donated to Mox News, I want to thank you so much, because it's because of your generosity that we have been able to bring attention to important videos that millions and millions of eyes would have never seen. And I think that that's an amazing thing that we've been able to make happen together. And I can't thank you enough for helping me make that happen. So it's not too late. If you'd like to see Mox News covering the 2020 presidential election, if you can't imagine the 2020 presidential election without Mox News, please, there's still time. You can make a difference. It's easy to make a contribution, donation, or tip. You can go to moxnews.com, or in the text body of this video, there are clickable links to the Patreon page or to the PayPal page. And again, it should take less than 2 minutes to make a donation, and your donation can make a big difference. So I thank you all. Stay cool. One of these days this war is going to end, and it would be awesome if Mox News could be there to celebrate that day with you.